Hello, my name is Michael Ramage. I'm the Director of the Cyber Education and Research Center at Murray State University, and welcome to 10 at 10. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and our local partner, Sprocket Innovation in Paducah, and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. So 10 at 10 is officially a year old. This week, 1 year ago, we started 10 at 10. When we started 10 at 10, we started with the idea that we wanted to create a weekly video series where we can talk to those folks that aren't cybersecurity experts, aren't computer engineers, but to help you stay safe in cyberspace. Our goal was and continues to be to talk to you and share tips and tricks with you straight in language that is easy to understand, as easy as it can be with cybersecurity, but so that you can take away tips and tricks that can help make yourself, your family, and your business a little bit safer in today's cyberspace. I've been very proud and happy about how the year has gone. We have received great feedback. We have received some suggestions on topics. We've had questions. It's been a really nice way to interact with folks around the region and in some cases around the country. What I would ask from you is that if you didn't share our video last year, if you didn't provide me feedback, if you didn't ask questions, do that. The questions that we get from you, I always take them into account when we are coming up with future topics that we want to talk about. Most of the questions and most of the topics that we cover are because these are questions that I get from you, that I get from individuals that are trying to figure some of these things out, and that's where the topics come from. So I want to make sure that we keep doing that, and we keep doing that by getting your feedback. I want your feedback, your positive feedback, your negative feedback. I just want your feedback, and that will make this 10 at 10 series a little more let it relate to you a little bit more in the coming year. So with that, let me get into today's topic. So last week we talked about privacy. Before that, we talked about some of the trends that we thought we might see in 2022. What I had shared was that starting today, that we would spend a few weeks on some of those tools and techniques that you can take to keep you, your family, and your business a little safer in 2022. And ironically, we're going to start 2022, I guess season 2 of 10 at 10 out, very similar to the way we started 10 at 10 initially. I want to provide those tips, those basic cybersecurity tips that you can take to help you stay safe. As much as our adversary changes, as much as the threats change, the core steps that you can take, the easiest steps that you can take, really haven't changed that much. So we want to talk about that, and let me share a little bit about this today. So what my plan is to, at a high level, talk about these 5 items today, and then come back in following weeks and get into a little more detail on each of these topics. So anyway, with that, let me start walking through some of these. If you have questions as I talk through these, remember we're going to come back to them in later weeks, but send me the question that you have so that when we do come back to them and we do cover these in a little more detail, I can make sure that I cover the question specifically that you have, and so that this topic makes sense to you as much as possible. All right, so number 1 is to create a security policy. Security policy may be the least exciting part of a cybersecurity plan that your company has, but frankly, it may be the most important. It is really hard to create a secure posture for your business or your family without knowing what to do. So let me go back. Last week we talked about privacy, and we talked about how to keep data private. And we talked about what types of data would we expect to be private, and what regulations do we have to follow? What are we required to keep private? Well, if we don't identify all of that information, if we don't come up with the policy that we expect to follow, then it's hard to actually implement security tools and techniques that are going to address that policy. For example, how often should you update your servers? Does it matter if it's a mission critical server versus a secondary server? How often should you update your desktop? What should your password policy be? You need a firewall. We all need a firewall for our network, but what should that firewall do? What type of firewall, and what policies or what rules should that firewall have? All of that should be driven by our policy. So creating a policy is very, first and foremost, the very first thing you should do. Second, probably the topic that I've talked about the most on 10 at 10 is passwords. We've got to have strong passwords. As much as things change, the avenue that is compromised more and more is passwords, or weak passwords. So we got to have strong passwords, and we've got to use two-factor authentication. You hear me harp on both of those, and we'll harp on those coming up in the next few weeks as well. But we've got to have strong passwords. And if there is a way to use two-factor authentication, I don't care what system it is, whether it's your corporate login, whether it's your email, your bank, I don't care, your Netflix account. I don't care what it is. If there's a way to do two-factor authentication, I want you to use two-factor authentication. Number 3, user education. Passwords and user education, and sometimes bad passwords are because of poor user education. But those two together are probably the biggest 2 steps that you can take in your organization to improve their security posture. User education is important. You've heard me say it. I'll say it again. Your users are probably the greatest asset that you have to your security, and probably the largest liability that you have to your security, because so much of it depends on your users. If your user receives an email from a phishing email from an email account that looks legit but is not legit, and they click the link in the email, it doesn't matter how great your security is for your company, you're going to get hit. That's how you get ransomware. And that's actually how most organizations are getting ransomware. That's changing, but that's it right now. So we've got to make sure that we use our users as security professionals, that we use our users, that we educate our users in a way that can help them be part of the solution rather than the problem. That's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge, and we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. Audit against policy and regulations. One of the important things I always say when I talk about policies, about auditing, assessing, is that you don't audit necessarily to get somebody in trouble. You're not auditing to find that user that's not following the rules. You're auditing to find those gaps in compliance so that we can figure out a way to make it more secure. That's the goal of auditing. Now, yes, it may be a user that's not following the rules. It may be somebody that's violating the policy, but that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to make sure that we're following the controls that we say that we're following, and that we're going to keep in compliance with the regulations that we say that we're supposed to be following. That's the goal of auditing, and we'll talk more about that when we get to that in a few weeks. And then finally, implement security technologies. Yes, we do need the technologies. We need firewalls. We need intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems and security incident and event managers. We need all of these things. We need to use encryption. We need to do all these cool things. But we've got to know how to do those. We've got to do those in a way that makes sense. So if you go back and you look at this list of 5 items, what you'll notice is the first 3 things are relatively cheap, inexpensive, if not free, except for your time. auditing, assessing can get more expensive, and then implementing security technologies is the most expensive. You can spend as little or as much money as you want on that. But those 5 things are going to make you safer. Is it perfect? There's a lot that goes into each of those 5 items, and we'll dig into each of those a little bit more. Is it certain that if you do these that you're going to be safe? No. There are a lot of bad actors that are all trying to break in and hack our systems. But we've got to do the things that we can. We've got to start. And these 5 tips or these 5 areas are, in my opinion, good places to start. So thank you for joining this week on 10 at 10. Let me remind you that if you have a question, share it with me, email it to me. Our contact information will be on the credit slide as usual. Send a message, comment on the video, call me. I don't care how you get in touch with me, but if you have a question, let me know. I want to make sure that I address it. I've got some good questions that we'll be addressing in the coming weeks once we get through these 5 items. But I want to make sure that I'm addressing the topics that you have in the areas where you need a little bit of help. Happy to help, always happy to help. Just let me know and I'll try to address those. But again, thank you for joining in on 10 at 10. We'll see you next week right back here on 10 at 10. Thank you.